When Larry Hagman died, he left behind a $5 million mansion full of mysteries, a sleep tower filled with bats, beds hanging from cables, and rumors of underground bunkers built by Scientology. Now, for the first time, we're revealing what really happened after the Dallas star's death and why his dream home became the center of Hollywood's strangest conspiracy. Larry Hagman was born on September 21, 1931, in Fort Worth, Texas. His life was shaped by two very different parents. His mother, Mary Martin, was a rising Broadway star. His father, Benjamin Jackson Hagman, was a serious district attorney. Their marriage didn't last long. By the time Larry was 5, they had divorced. After the split, his mother moved to California to chase her dreams. Larry stayed behind in Texas with his grandmother, Juanita Presley Martin. Life with her was calm and steady. She told him stories about his mother's success on Broadway, painting a world full of lights and applause. But that comfort didn't last. When Larry was 12, his grandmother passed away. Losing her was devastating. Without her, he had no choice but to rejoin his mother, who was now living in New York. His mother had remarried a theater producer named Richard Halliday. Their life revolved around the stage, the energy, and the constant movement of Broadway. For Larry, it was exciting, but also overwhelming. His mother was the star. He was just a boy watching from the sidelines. Meanwhile, his father had a different plan for him. He wanted Larry to study law, something stable and respectable, but Larry was already drawn to acting. Before he could make any choices about his future, his father sent him to Black Fox Military Institute in Los Angeles. The school was strict, designed to shape boys into disciplined leaders, but Larry didn't take well to rules. The pressure only pushed him further into rebellion. By 14, he had already started drinking, a habit that would follow him for years. Military school was supposed to keep him in line, but it only made him want freedom even more. That freedom came when he transferred to Weatherford High School in Texas. This was where everything changed. He joined drama class, stepped onto a stage for the first time, and felt something click. Acting gave him a way to express himself, something military school had never allowed. His father wasn't happy. A legal career was safe. Acting was a risk, but Larry didn't care. He had made up his mind. To support himself, he worked at the Antelope Tool Company, a business that made oil field equipment. The job had nothing to do with acting, but it gave him insight into power and business. Years later, those lessons would help him create one of television's most iconic characters, J.R. Ewing. Even as a teenager, Larry had a way of watching people, studying them, figuring out what made them tick. After graduating in 1949, he went to Bard College in New York to study drama and dance. The school was full of artists, musicians, and free thinkers. It was nothing like military school, and he loved it, but structure wasn't his strong suit. After 1 year, he dropped out and went straight into the world of acting, ready to take on whatever came next. Larry Hagman's journey into acting started in 1950 at Margot Jones's Theater in the Round in Dallas. It was his first real step into the world of theater, a place that would shape the rest of his life. A year later, he landed a role in The Taming of the Shrew at New York's City Center. Directed by Margaret Webster, the production gave him the chance to work with some of the best in the industry. It wasn't a starring role, but it put him on the right path. That same year, he took an even bigger step. He traveled to London to join his mother in the West End production of South Pacific. The show was already a massive success, running for nearly 2 years with over 800 performances. Hagman had a small speaking role and also performed in the chorus, but being part of something that big was an experience he couldn't have gotten anywhere else. His mother, Mary Martin, played the lead role of Nellie Forbush. To what it really meant to be a professional actor, he learned by watching, listening, and doing. In 1952, just as he was finding his footing in the theater world, he was drafted into the U.S. Air Force. His service could have pulled him away from acting completely, but instead, it sent him down a different path. He was stationed in London, where he became part of the Special Services, a unit that entertained American troops. He didn't just perform. He produced and directed shows, traveling across Europe to bring live entertainment to servicemen. He was learning how to manage productions, work under pressure, and put together performances that connected with an audience. The Air Force also changed his life in another way. While stationed in London, he met Maj Axelsson, a Swedish clothing designer. The two fell in love and married in 1954. By the time Hagman finished his service in 1956, he had not only gained valuable experience, but had also started a family. Returning to New York, he jumped right back into acting. He performed in both Broadway Broadway and off-Broadway productions, including Comes a Day and The Nervous Set. His official Broadway debut came in 1958 with God and Kate Murphy. Television was starting to become a bigger part of the entertainment industry, but Hagman never fully stepped away from theater. It remained a constant in his career, a place where he could always return. His first steady job in television came in the early 1960s when he joined the soap opera The Edge of Night. He played a recurring role from 1961 to 1963. Working on a soap opera was demanding. It required quick memorization, emotional performances, and the ability to keep up with fast-moving storylines. It was a crash course in television acting. Then, in 1965, everything changed. He landed the role of Major Tony Nelson in I Dream of Jeannie. The show paired him with Barbara Eden, who played a mischievous genie determined to make his life as chaotic as possible. The chemistry between them was instant. The show became a hit, running for 5 seasons and turning Hagman into a familiar face in homes across the country. The story started with Tony, a U.S. Air Force captain, crash landing on a deserted island during a space mission. While exploring, he found an old bottle and popped the cork, not expecting what would happen next. A cloud of pink smoke poured out, and suddenly, there she was, Jeannie, a 2,000-year-old genie played by Barbara Eden. From that moment, his life was never the same. Jeannie was head over heels for Tony from the start, calling him master and doing everything she could to make him happy. The problem was, her idea of helping usually made things worse. She turned simple situations into chaos with her magic, leaving Tony to cover up her tricks before anyone found out. He wanted a normal life and a successful career in the Air Force, but that was nearly impossible with Jeannie around. No matter how many times he told her to stay out of trouble, she always found a way to make things interesting. Hagman played Tony as the serious, rule-following officer who was always one step away from losing his mind. His ability to react to Jeannie's wild ideas with frustration and disbelief made the show even funnier. Over time, Tony's feelings for Jeannie started to change. At first, he saw her as a handful, someone he had to manage. But as the seasons went on, he softened. By the 5th season, the two got married, a decision that split fans. Some thought it was a natural progression, while others believed it ruined the chemistry that made the show so fun to watch. When I Dream of Jeannie premiered in 1965, it quickly became a hit. NBC wanted a show that could compete with Bewitched, and they got exactly that. Viewers loved the magical mischief, and the show landed in the Nielsen Top 30 within its first season. But for Hagman, the success wasn't always easy. After the show ended in 1970, he struggled to move past the role. Hollywood saw him as Major Nelson, and getting cast in something different wasn't easy. Off-screen, things were far from perfect. While Hagman and Barbara Eden had great chemistry on camera, behind the scenes, he was unpredictable. He wasn't happy with the scripts and felt like Eden's character had more attention than his own. Frustrated and overwhelmed, he turned to alcohol and drugs. His behavior became a problem for the cast and crew, and his on-set antics became legendary. Some days, he showed up drunk. Other times, he took LSD before filming. He once arrived wearing a gorilla suit just to mess with everyone. Another time, he grabbed an axe and started shouting at the crew. But the most shocking moment came when he urinated on the set furniture out of frustration. Eden later admitted that working with Hagman could be difficult. His mood swings and unpredictable outbursts made filming challenging, but she always respected him as a friend and actor. The situation got so bad that NBC brought in a therapist to help, though the plan backfired when the therapist actually encouraged Hagman's drug use, thinking it would help him relax. At one point, executives considered firing him, but they knew the show wouldn't work without him. Years later, Hagman looked back on that time with regret. His drinking and drug use had hurt his career, his health, and his relationships. But despite everything, his performance on screen never suffered. No matter what was happening behind the scenes, he delivered. Beyond the drama, I Dream of Jeannie left a lasting impact. The show came out during the 1960s, a time when traditional gender roles were being questioned. On the surface, Jeannie seemed like the perfect example of a woman who existed only to serve her man. But in reality, she was the one with the power. She could make anything happen with a blink, and Tony, despite being in charge, spent most of his time trying to control the chaos she created. Not everything about the show aged well. Jeannie's costume and backstory played into outdated stereotypes, romanticizing Middle Eastern culture in a way that Hollywood had done for years. But But even with its flaws, the show remained a favorite for decades. The magic might have been fictional, but the impact it left on television was very real. Larry Hagman was already a well-known actor before Dallas came along, but nobody expected how much one role would change everything. Before stepping into the world of ruthless oil deals and family feuds, he was the charming astronaut Major Nelson in I Dream of Jeannie. That show was lighthearted and full of magic tricks. Dallas was the complete opposite. It was drama, betrayal, and power struggles. And at the center of it all was J.R. Ewing, the man people loved to hate. J.R. wasn't just another TV villain. He was charming, ruthless, and always one step ahead. Hagman played him so well that audiences forgot he had ever been a comedic actor. Even his co-star, Patrick Duffy, admitted that the whole cast ended up riding Hagman's coattails for over a decade. What made J.R. so unforgettable was how unpredictable he was. He could be cruel one moment and completely likable the next. Hagman later revealed that he based J.R. on real-life experiences. He once worked on a Texas farm under a tough boss and used that memory to shape the character's attitude. He also borrowed a few traits from a role he had in the film Stardust. Whatever his inspiration was, it worked. J.R. quickly became the most important character on the show, turning Dallas into a worldwide phenomenon. It aired in over 90 countries, and even members of the British royal family were fans. South Fork Ranch, the Ewings' famous estate, became a real tourist attraction, but nothing compared to what happened in 1980, when Dallas delivered one of the biggest TV moments of all time. The episode A House Divided ended with J.R. getting shot by an unknown attacker. That single moment set off a wave of excitement like never before. Everyone wanted to know who pulled the trigger. It wasn't just a TV cliffhanger, it became a global obsession. People wore "Who Shot J.R." shirts. Politicians made jokes about it. In Turkey, lawmakers reportedly paused parliamentary sessions just to watch the big reveal. When the episode Who Done It finally aired, 83 million Americans tuned in to see the answer. Kristen Shepard, J.R.'s sister-in-law and former mistress, was revealed as the shooter. It was a television event like no other. The episode became one of the most watched in history, with a staggering 53.3 Nielsen rating. That meant more than half of all TV-owning households in the U.S. were watching. But for Hagman, the real game was happening off-screen. His contract was up for renewal, and he knew Dallas couldn't afford to lose. J.R. Hagman played his cards perfectly. He left for London with his family while negotiations were still going on, making it clear he was willing to walk away. At one point, producers even discussed writing J.R. out of the show, but deep down they knew they couldn't. Hagman won. Before the Who Shot J.R. craze, he was earning $15,000 per episode. After the negotiations, his salary jumped to $100,000 per episode. By the end of Dallas, he was making $250,000 per episode, making him one of the highest-paid actors on TV. He also secured a share of Dallas merchandise profits, something almost unheard of at the time. Larry Hagman's return to Dallas in 2012 was something no one expected but everyone wanted. At 80 years old and fighting cancer, he stepped back into the role of J.R. Ewing like he had never left. The TNT reboot premiered on June 13, 2012, and over 8 million people tuned in that first week. It became the biggest scripted cable premiere of the year. Hagman didn't just play J.R. again. He made him even better. He was just as sharp, just as ruthless, but now with new layers that made him even more compelling. Critics praised him for adding depth to a character he had already made legendary. Filming wasn't easy. He had been diagnosed with throat cancer in 2011 and was going through chemotherapy while working on the show. But he didn't slow down. He kept showing up, delivering every line with the same energy that made J.R. an icon. Then, in November 2012, during production for Season 2, he passed away. His death was a huge loss, not just for the show, but for television history. The writers knew they had to honor him the right way. Episode 8 of Season 2 became J.R. Ewing's funeral. It wasn't just a scene, it was a goodbye to both the character and the man who played him. Fans felt it. The cast felt it. It was the kind of tribute that didn't need words to explain why Hagman was irreplaceable. Outside of television, Hagman proved he could take on serious film roles. In Nixon, 1995, directed by Oliver Stone, he played Jack Jones, a billionaire whose wealth and power had corrupted everything around him. The character wasn't based on a real real person, but the performance felt like a reflection of something true. It had echoes of JR, but with a darker, more unsettling edge. In Primary Colors, 1998, he played Governor Fred Picker, a straight-talking politician with a troubled past. He was up against a star-studded cast that included John Travolta and Emma Thompson, yet he stood out. His character was a moral contrast to the film's ethically questionable lead, and he played it with the perfect mix of charm and quiet intensity. The role showed he wasn't just a TV actor. He could take on complex characters in stories that tackled power and ambition in a way that felt real. Even late in his career, he still found ways to surprise people. In 2011, he made a guest appearance on Desperate Housewives, playing Frank Kaminsky, a loud and obnoxious love interest for Lynette Scavo's mother. It was only 2 episodes, but it was classic Hagman. Funny, a little over the top, and impossible to ignore. He hadn't even watched the show before taking the role, but his granddaughter convinced him to do it. That appearance ended up being one of his last roles before returning to Dallas. Meanwhile, Larry Hagman and Maj Axelson had a marriage that lasted nearly 60 years. It wasn't just long, it was built on resilience. They met in the early 1950s at an Air Force supply station through a mutual friend. Maj was a Swedish dress designer who had moved to London for her career. When she first met Larry, she thought he was too flashy, but his charm slowly won her over. Their engagement wasn't traditional. Hagman proposed while their car was stuck in the mud, a moment that seemed to define their unpredictable life together. Maj wasn't just his wife, she was his strongest supporter. She traveled with him to filming locations and stood by him as his career took off. But being married to Larry Hagman wasn't easy. He was open about his infidelity, sometimes even bringing his lovers home for dinner. Some joined the family in the jacuzzi, a situation that would have ended most marriages. But Maj stayed. She chose to focus on the life they had rather than the chaos around them. Their daughter Heidi later revealed in her memoir, The Eternal Party, that their marriage was anything but ordinary. Yet through it all, Maj remained by his side. She helped him battle alcoholism and substance abuse. Together, they also worked for causes they cared about, like organ donation and solar energy. Hagman's off-screen life was just as wild as the characters he played. For over 20 years, he lived in Malibu, where he hosted parties that became legendary. Celebrities, socialites, and Hollywood insiders all gathered at his home. These weren't just regular parties. They were extravagant, filled with endless drinking and wild antics. One night, he rode home in a bright green gorilla suit just for fun. His lifestyle was excessive, and he made no effort to hide it. One of his strangest habits was silent Sunday. Every Sunday, he refused to speak. Instead, he whistled. He had an entire system where different whistles meant different things. One meant yes, another meant no. More complicated ideas required a full set of signals. His friends and co-stars never really understood why he did it, but he stuck to it for decades. Even at restaurants, his wife had to order food for him while he stayed completely silent. Some thought it was a way to practice self-control. Others believed it was just another one of his eccentric habits. And he had plenty of those. He also clapped at sunsets every evening, a ritual inspired by Zen philosophy. At his gatherings, he held gong bong ceremonies at dusk, adding another layer to his already fascinating personality. To the people who knew him, he was a mix of contradictions. He lived without limits, but searched for inner peace. Larry Hagman started drinking when he was just 14. It wasn't just a habit. It became part of his life. By the time he was playing J.R. Ewing on Dallas, his drinking had reached extreme levels. He went through as many as 5 bottles of champagne a day. He claimed he never seemed drunk because he sipped just enough to stay in a pleasantly inebriated state. But the damage was real. In 1992, doctors diagnosed him with cirrhosis of the liver. 3 years later, they found a malignant tumor. Without a transplant, he had less than 6 months to live. In August 1995, he underwent a liver transplant. The surgery lasted 15 hours. His condition was so severe that doctors had to rebuild blood vessels to make the transplant work. The operation saved his life, but not without controversy. Some people believed celebrities like Hagman got special treatment, even when their health problems were caused by their own choices. But he didn't waste the second chance. He became an advocate for organ donation and sobriety. Still, he later admitted he kept drinking in secret until another health scare in 2003 finally forced him to stop for good. good. His drinking didn't just hurt him, it affected his family. His daughter Christina said their home life was chaotic because of his alcohol and drug use. Before he passed away in 2012, he looked back on everything and asked his family for forgiveness. He was open about his struggles, never hiding from his past. In doing so, he helped shine a light on the dangers of addiction and the long road to recovery. In the 1960s, Hagman's journey took another turn. He experimented with LSD after musician David Crosby introduced him to it. His first trip changed everything. He felt connected to the universe in a way he never had before. He didn't see LSD as just a drug. To him, it was something deeper. He compared it to the out-of-body experiences he had later in life during medical procedures. It wasn't just about getting high. It was about understanding life and death in a new way. At the time, LSD was feared by many. Talking about it openly could hurt a person's reputation, but Hagman didn't care. He wrote about his experiences in his autobiography, Hello, Darlin', knowing it might stir up controversy. He was already battling other personal struggles. He had given up tobacco and prescription amphetamines. LSD became part of a search for meaning during a chaotic time in his life. Some saw him as reckless. Others believed he was just someone trying to explore the world in his own way. In 2011, at 80 years old, he was diagnosed with stage 2 throat cancer. True to his nature, he met it with humor. He joked that J.R. Ewing could get away with anything, but even he couldn't escape cancer. He kept working despite the illness. While undergoing treatment, he continued filming the Dallas reboot. He finished most of the second season before his health started to fail. By mid-2012, doctors declared his cancer in remission, but it didn't last. He was soon diagnosed with myelodysplastic syndrome, which turned into acute myeloid leukemia. On November 23, 2012, he passed away in Dallas, the city that had made him a television legend. His co-stars shared memories of the man behind J.R. Linda Gray, called him her best friend. Patrick Duffy spoke about how Hagman had always been there for him. His daughter Heidi described him as flawed but loving. Christina wrote about their complicated relationship in her book, The Eternal Party. He was larger than life, but those closest to him knew the real man, the one who struggled, the one who searched for meaning, and the one who, in the end, tried to make peace with his past. Larry Hagman and his wife Madge started building their dream home in 1987. 4 years later, it was finished. They called it Heaven, and it truly was. Sitting high on Sulphur Mountain in Ojai, California, the estate had a view that stretched for miles. The Pacific Ocean, the Channel Islands, endless valleys. It was peaceful, private, and exact what they had dreamed of. The property covered 43 acres, filled with citrus and avocado trees. There were vegetable gardens, over 400 rose bushes, and even chickens. The estate was partly self-sufficient, providing fresh food straight from the land. Its remote location made it nearly impossible for strangers to wander in. The Hagmans valued their privacy, and Heaven gave them exactly that. The house itself was a masterpiece, a Mediterranean-style mansion with 3 wings built around a courtyard. It was massive, 23,000 square feet, but designed to feel warm and inviting. There were 9 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, and 5 fireplaces. The grand living room had a retractable roof that opened to the sky. Right below it, a saltwater lap pool stretched across the floor. The ceilings rose 28 feet, making the space feel even larger. When they hosted parties, up to 200 guests could comfortably fit inside. But Heaven wasn't just about beauty. It was also built to be ahead of its time. In 2003, Hagman installed one of the largest residential solar power systems in the country. The 94-kilowatt array cost $750,000, but it changed everything. His electricity bill, which had been $37,000 a year, dropped to just $13. The system even generated extra power that was sold back to the grid. Water came from on-site wells, and fresh fruit grew in the orchards. The estate wasn't just luxurious, it was self-sustaining. Hagman believed in solar energy so much that he didn't stop with his own home. He donated solar panels to 6 families in Los Angeles, inspiring other celebrities like Brad Pitt and Edward Norton to do the same. He wasn't just thinking about the future of his own property, he was trying to make a difference. There were other features that made Heaven even more unique. A private helipad sat on the grounds, but it wasn't just for convenience. In exchange for permission to build it, Hagman installed a water system that firefighting helicopters could use in an emergency. In 1996, a wildfire surrounded Heaven, and that system proved invaluable. Helicopters helicopters used water from Hagman's pools to battle the flames, helping save the estate from destruction. And then there was the sleep tower. Suspended 36 feet in the air, held up by cables, it was built for one purpose: stargazing. Ojai had some of the clearest skies in California, untouched by city light. At first, Hagman loved sleeping up there under the open sky, but over time, he stopped using it. Guests, however, couldn't get enough of it. After parties and late-night gatherings, many would climb up and spend the night under a blanket of stars. But there was one problem. Bats had moved in. Guests often found them nesting in the rafters, adding an eerie twist to the tower's charm. Hagman didn't seem to mind. He had a way of laughing off things that would bother most people. On more than one occasion, he simply brushed bat droppings off the mattress and invited guests to sit. Visitors often ended up helping clean up, but despite the mess, the tower remained a favorite spot. The view was too stunning to resist, and on clear nights, the sky stretched endlessly above, untouched by city lights. The bats were just one part of the wildlife that roamed heaven. Cougars, bears, and coyotes were regular visitors. The estate, for all its luxury, sat right in the middle of nature, but that was part of its magic. Hagman embraced it all, seeing beauty even in the things that others might find inconvenient. Inside the house, things were just as strange. In his bedroom, a bed hung from cables, suspended 36 feet in the air. It wasn't just for look. The design let it sway gently with the breeze, giving the feeling of floating. Throughout the house, bizarre artwork filled the walls. Some pieces were surrealist paintings, others were sculptures with strange shapes and unexpected designs. Nothing was ordinary. Every piece had a story, and Hagman loved using them to start conversations at his famous parties and fundraisers. After Hagman passed away in 2012, the house revealed another side of him. Family photos covered the walls, showing not just his Hollywood life, but also the deep bond he shared with his wife Maj Axelson and their children. Memorabilia from Dallas was everywhere, including portraits of Jock Ewing, the fictional patriarch of the Ewing family. The role of J.R. Ewing had made Hagman a television legend, and the reminders of it were impossible to miss. Among his belongings were handwritten notes. Some were letters, others were thoughts about life, fame, and the lessons he had learned. They offered a glimpse into a man who had changed over the years. He had gone from Hollywood wildcard to a passionate advocate for organ donation after his liver transplant in 1995. In 2013, Larry Hagman's estate, known as Heaven, was sold for $5 million in cash. The buyer was a nonprofit linked to the Church of Scientology, a group known for acquiring high-profile properties. For years, this estate had been a lively place where celebrities gathered for fundraisers and events. Now, it was about to become something very different. After the purchase, Scientology converted the estate into a luxury drug rehabilitation center called Narconon Ojai. By 2015, it was open to clients, offering programs that followed the teachings of Scientology's founder, L. Ron Hubbard. The facility charged around $30,000 a month, attracting wealthy individuals, including well-known Scientologists like John Travolta and Tom Cruise. But the treatment methods were unusual. Instead of traditional rehab practices, patients went through intense sauna sessions and took large doses of vitamins. Medical experts criticized these methods, saying they had no real scientific basis. This rehab center was part of a much larger plan. Scientology had been opening similar facilities around the world, creating exclusive treatment centers that also served as recruitment grounds. People arrived looking for help, but they were also introduced to the belief system behind the program. As strange as this transformation was, rumors suggested there was more to the story. Some believed that underground vaults had been built beneath the estate, designed to store Hubbard's writings on titanium plate. Scientology had done this before in other locations, locking away his works in disaster-proof bunkers meant to last thousands of years. Some former members even claimed these underground sites could serve as shelters for Scientology's most powerful figures in case of a global crisis. There was no proof that a vault existed under Narconon Ojai, but the estate's remote location on Sulphur Mountain made it a perfect hiding place. Over the years, the church had been known for keeping secrets, and this was just one more mystery surrounding the property.